appointment.
So that has been addressed, but I'll let the presenter comment on that. And thank you for your comments, Senator Borges. Moving along, I can't remember the order I initially presented, but if you'll indulge me, we'll go to Senator Wojtkowski, and then
an opportunity for the presenter to comment.
He'll comment on at his close. I've asked him to do that. Senator Wojtkowski.
So, Madam Chair, I too would like to do a shout out for Allison Meredith, who wrote the staff report. This is my 10th year in the legislature. I've been on the Assembly and Senate Judiciary committees all the time, and everybody does a wonderful job. This is something that was well written, but it also tees up this task force, because we can go back 155 years and ask, why was this not done when the Civil War was over? And then you go into the Jim Crow laws in the turn of the century in the early 20s, but the staff report highlights how the New Deal was really a white deal, and that it excluded domestic workers and agricultural workers, which, seeing it as I read it yesterday, jumped off at the pages with me. And then I moved into the GI Bill, which excluded, in the red line that we all know about, and as it excluded the African American people. And then you get into the criminal or federal criminalization of law and the mass incarceration. And if we don't do this task force and set up the reparation, when does it stop? When does California society or the American society look at these sores that we have? And I commend the author and the presenter today for bringing it. I'm filled with guilt, as I should be, and all of us should be, about the lack of attention that we've had to this cancer that we have in our society, and that should be addressed. So I appreciate the indulgence of the committee.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Monning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to convey my thanks to the author, Assemblymember Weber, her leadership on this and so many related issues, and to the presenter, Senator Bradford. I also want to just offer my thanks to Allison Meredith. It's an amazing analysis. I've printed it out to share with family members, and I guess I can also forward it as an email attachment when I figure out how to do that. But so many who, including myself, were taught in schools that California was established not as a slave state, and that was one of the fights that took place in Monterey in whether or not the Constitution of the state of California would recognize the institution of slavery or not. And while it didn't formally, you look at the legacy and vestiges of, on so many fronts, recognizing ownership of other people by people coming into the state of California, the denial of property rights, the redlining, and the list goes on to put us in our challenge today. The depth of the challenge may be only offset by the movement underway in this country right now. The loss of John Lewis, and yet in death his life is being better understood and shared around the country, and so many others, young people stepping up in resistance to police practices, but going beyond police practices. I fully support the establishment of this commission. I would hope that part of its study would look to the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions established by Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu in South Africa. A different country, a different history, but deep wounds coming out of decades of war and apartheid, and convening forums where people faced each other and shared their loss, their grief, their responsibility, and was a healing process that's still underway, but it was recognized by the leaders of the South African Revolution that it was essential for the country to be able to move forward. This never happened in this country, and I would hope that this would mark a starting point. Glad to support the bill. I'd be proud to move the bill at the appropriate time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Durazo, followed by Senator Gonzalez, and I see Senator Stern's hand is up, so he will be probably before our close, but let's go ahead to Senator Durazo.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Bradford, for presenting this to us, and to Dr. Weber on the author's report. This to your staff, pretty amazing, and I think we all want to just gonna rush to share this across the country. There's, I'm sure, a lot that will be uncovered in terms of the material damage and losses that were inflicted on generations and generations of Black Americans. But there's also the trauma, and there are a lot of things. Someone asked, when does it stop? It stops when we get to the bottom of it all. It stops when we really figure out the extent of the damage to generations of Black Americans. And I hope through this, just as the analysis became more of a historic picture, I hope we can go even further, because as slaves tried to get away in the South and the Southeast, and they went more west, they were moving closer and closer to, they went to Texas before it was Texas, because they wanted to get away from slavery. And the primary reason that there was a U.S.-Mexico war was because of slavery. The people living in Texas said, we want slavery here too, and they were part of Mexico, and it was illegal in Mexico for decades before it had become illegal. So there is so much to uncover that I hope in the process of coming up with what the plan on the reparations, how to address reparations, that we also use this as an opportunity to really educate and inform so many of us on many issues that we don't know about. And finally, I want to give that as an example. I've mentioned this with regards to the loss of Congressman Lewis. In 2003, we did the Immigrant Workers Freedom Ride, which was really an extraordinary experience of Americans of all colors traveling across the country for several weeks and stopping in small towns and big cities and ending up in New York. And I remember with the immigrants who were on the buses, when we stopped to learn about the history of slavery and African Americans and the Civil Rights Movement, they didn't know. They didn't know the human side of this, not just the historic moments. And so I see this more as a educational as much as it will be a reparation. So I am so proud that we're doing this finally. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Durazo. Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you to Senator Bradford and Dr. Weber and everyone who provided testimony in person and over the phone. I too am in strong support. I will say that back home in Long Beach, we're creating a framework for reconciliation. I think this action here will set the stage and the floor for what could be done back home in Los Angeles and all across the state. I hope that cities see this as an opportunity to educate, not just in the California history, but the history of each of our cities in terms of reconciling the history of, for instance, the KKK that was in Long Beach in the 1920s that we've just realized, and understanding what we can do here to change the change where we're at and improve. And it's not just acknowledgement; it's going to be listening and coupled with a lot of action, which is what I hope. The most important thing and profound thing for me in the task force recommendations was the appropriate ways to educate the California public of the task force's findings and ensuring that everybody understands our history in this way. But it's going to set the stage certainly for transformational change, which I'm very proud to support. Thank you again.
Thank you. Senator Stern from the remote network of Los Angeles, if you would like to say a few words, we've got you there. Go ahead and share with us your thoughts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Bradford, and to Dr. Weber for educating all of us, not just those of us in the building, but it sounds like students around the state and the nation are benefiting from your insistence on some truth and reconciliation here in California. I did have a question just in terms of the scope. I was looking at a Washington Post investigative piece about some of the histories of private and public institutions' complicity in slavery, specifically universities, military institutions, churches that had a sort of documented history and went back far enough to actually trace that and do the accounting. And as my colleagues and you all have brought up, California's history is not as a free state, but as a sort of a secret slave state. And in fact, the gold rush, I applaud the ACLU for their recent work publishing gold chains, which documented the history, in fact, of us selling slaves in this state and bringing slaves in and essentially building California's economy on the back of slavery in hidden form as miners and other forced labor. But I'm wondering, are there requirements in the bill? I was trying to sort of read into the text itself and just make sure that we're going to be able to push private institutions and solicit data from them to actually be able to go back and track, for instance, in banking institutions or universities that may have owned slaves. Do we have will this commission have enough force in law to be able to go back and compel that data?
Do you have an answer for that, or?
Well, we're working right now with the insurance commissioner, Ricardo Lara, and making sure and going back historically and looking at those companies that insured and invested in slaves and those payouts that many of these corporations received due to slave ownership. So that's the first start. And so we commend the commissioner for working hand in hand with not only Dr. Weber, but the Legislative Black Caucus on this as well. So I hope that we will delve a lot deeper. I think this 8-member commission will help build out that which is necessary to kind of like right the wrongs and level the playing field and expose some of the wrongs that have happened over the last 160 years since slavery and the promises that were made to African Americans that have been broken. So yes, we're looking at that. We're looking at companies also, like I say, in New York who invested in the slave trade and on the East Coast as well. So those are the things that we will be exploring. So yes.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that clarification. That was actually my only follow-up question, was how is it going with the insurance commissioner as well as with the UC regents, because I know we do have some existing laws on the books, and I just want to see what kind of progress we're making. But you're welcome to address that in your close. If there's ever an opportunity to amend further, I'd love to be added on as a co-author, but at this point I'll just be a strong eye. And today's a day of mourning in the Jewish religion. It's Tisha B'Av, which is the saddest day of the year, where we mourn the loss of people throughout history and our loss of holiness. And it's only appropriate today that we reflect on our own sadnesses and our own complicity in all this. So thank you for bringing this forward today.
Alrighty. Seeing no further